My name is Nikolas Winding Refn, and I'm the writer-director of Bronson. Bronson as a script came to me through Rupert Preston, who I have worked with for about 10 years as he distributes all my films in the UK. And in the last couple of years, when he went into Vertigo Films, he's been kind of like showing me things that they were in development and back and forth. So one day he calls me up and says, you know, you should read this something called Czarl's Bronson. And it's about, not the actor, but about this British character. And I'm not really that keen and really interested in it. I was at that point again trying to stay away from anything violent with men, as I've done so many of those kind of films. But when I read the script, there was something very intriguing in it, but it wasn't very good. And I know a lot of people had been working on it, so for me to take it upon myself to make it, I kind of had to find out what I could do with it. And when I kind of found that out, you know, we decided to basically just go along with it, and that's how it came about. When we first started talking about it, Tom Hardy was at that point kind of set to play Czarl's Bronson. Then there was back and forth, but when I kind of decided to do it, in a way we had to start from scratch, and we kind of just said, okay, who's out there? And we went through some various casting directors, and I met with one that was really on the ball of what potential actors were out there. And we did speak to, I did had some meetings with some more named actors, but it just didn't really work out with them. And it kind of went to Tom again, and I felt that he probably was the best for the choice, and it turned out I was right. Well, Tom has a very strange fascination with Czarl's Bronson. So I think for him to play him, he brings something else than what I'm making a movie about, which actually makes it work. My film is more about the concept of Charlie Bronson, how he transforms himself into what he has become, this kind of mythological media extravaganza. Tom's approach was much more personal because he had spent time with him, visiting him in prison, corresponding with him, you know, basically grew up on him. I didn't know even who he was when I started reading it, and I never met him. I only spoke with him on the phone for about 20 minutes. But Tom had been really, really researching Czarl's Bronson. So in that way, we kind of helped each other because we brought something different. Me not knowing who he was, I think, for me was probably the best thing around, in that I didn't have any judgmental aspects. I didn't have a political agenda. I didn't have a social agenda. I didn't have a cultural agenda. For me, in a way, it was kind of had to recreate the personality in a way, and I used the Bronson character as a kind of Odyssey character. But of course I had to, being a biopic, I needed to stay within a certain realness of his life, which of course I did. But I think that it helped me not really having an association with him. So I kind of had a more kind of like, I had the liberty to basically do anything because I wasn't restricted. When it came to research, I didn't know quite how to approach it. I did read his biography, and that was really about it. But I kind of very quickly went away, and also from the script that was floating around at that time, was more traditional. It was very cliche-ish. It had a lot of like kind of homemade philosophy, which wasn't very interesting. And I felt that there was much more to the Czarl's Bronson personality than there actually was given in the script. So for me, it was kind of, how can I reinvent this man as a showman who I really think he is? And he's a great publicist, you know. I can't judge him because I don't really know who he is.
Do you feel
Well, I can't really call this a biopic because it's not a chronologically explained film about a person's life. I think the film I made, or at least in the sense that it's more about the concept where one person transforms themselves into something else. Is that a biopic? I'll leave that up to the critics. But personally, I think it's more of a insight to the mind of Czarl's Bronson. And that's also the reasons why, you know, when I shoot in chronological order, which gives me the possibility to really develop the film as progresses. I reshot a lot of the movie. About 40% of the movie is reshot. When I saw things I didn't like, I went back and did it again. And it was very much an odyssey of exploring into the mind of this person, really getting deep into the emotional side of him. So in a way, I guess it's a biopic, but in a way it's not, because it's more of a character study. Well, I usually find a piece of music that kind of gets me in the right track of mind, or and I did listen to an awful lot of the Pet Shop Boys while I was writing it, and I was thinking a lot about, you know, American independent films in the 50s, you know, late 40s into the 50s, early 60s. Where it was very fragmentic storytelling. It was very almost experimental to its approach in many ways. You mix very many different layers of storytelling. There is the real world. There's the world that Charlie wants us to see him in. There's, I guess, the Charlie deep down who kind of narrates, and then there's the Charlie on stage who kind of is really what he's looking for. He's an artist looking for his stage. So there were many of that aspects of the film. I think a movie like Scorpion Rising was definitely something that I was very conscious of when I was making it, together with, you know, a film like Clockwork Orange, which is also about a kind of taking a very controversial subject and humanizing it. Well, I was very fortunate to get Larry Smith to do it. I mean, we had no money, which is kind of also a way I prefer to work. I do think that creativity needs a lot of uphill work, and Rupert and so forth were very respectful in what I wanted to do, basically, because, you know, I would change the film from day to day as we were up in Nottingham. And with Larry, I'd worked before on, so I was fortunate to get him, and his visual style was very much part of making this kind of dream-esque sensibility around the world that we create. In a way, you know, I am a picture-making storyteller. I do tell in images, which is I've chosen as a medium. So it is a very important standard. But I think he really brought a very distinctive look to the movie that's very colorful, and not very, you know, usually British films are grey and depressing, where this was full of life, and color was very aggressive, very saturated, burned out images and things like that. Almost opera-esque in that sense. And that's how we composed the music as well. At a very early stage, I kind of really decided I wanted to do a lot of classical music, and I thought I was going to redo the classical music, a bit like Clockwork Orange had done, but the editor, Matt Newman, and I kind of came to the conclusion that the classical music actually worked by itself. So it was in that way very much a teamwork effort. Well, I think that filmmaking is a collaborative medium within a very dictatorial attitude. So it's basically, being a director is very easy. You just inspire everybody else to be really, really good. And then you take credit for it. With Matt, one of the deal for me to make this movie was because I was in actually early pre-production on another movie, Valhalla Rising, which then Vertigo was set to distribute. It was kind of easy to do Bronson right before because it was into the same people. But I needed somebody like Matt Newman, who edited the movie, to kind of supervise the whole post and really be with me on it. And he would cut as we would shoot, and we would look at night on it and see what worked and what didn't work. And it was very great because, you know, again, I reshot a lot of the movie because we kept on, or at least I kept on asking questions within the possibilities of what it was to make. So we went deeper and deeper and deeper. You know, in the end, I think the line producer just kind of gave up even thinking about if we were reshooting or just expecting we were going to reshoot everything. Well, I always work in chronology order. It's like, if you know what you're going to do, why do it? My attitude to everything, I do believe film is an art form. It's organic. It needs to have that living, breathing aspects and so on. The Pussy trilogy was much easier because, in a sense, they were character studies, but in a very real environment. Bronson had many layers, and therefore it was more of a discovery process on how to steer it through these aspects. Yeah, strong male characters. I guess I'm a man and I do relate to how they work. But I think actually Bronson is a very feminine movie. And I mean that in a good way. But that was again one of the things, you know, if I was going to make a prison movie, I was going to make it the exact opposite of what you would do. You know, it's not about escaping, it's about staying in. It's not about masculinity, it's about femininity. You know, being about feminine, because art is a feminine medium. You know, being art, an expressive space is a feminine approach, even though it may be very masculine, but it is a feminine attitude. And so I think that's why I wanted to explore Bronson the way I did, because I suddenly said there was an opportunity for me to do something very, very opposite of what I would usually do with a film like that. Well, oddly enough, you know, if the film turns out good, you usually just look back as it was fun. But it was tough, but every movie is tough. But it was tough because it was such a demanding thing, and I was searching for something I didn't know quite what was while I was shooting it. But luckily we had a very good crew, very young crew actually, which very strangely gave a lot of energy around. You know, Tom was very easy to work with. I mean, you know, he did what I told him to, and but at the same time, he also he challenged me a few times, which was good because, you know, you need that kind of sparse, you know. But otherwise, it was a very easy shoot in that way. I think for Bronson, it really came down to making a film about what it's like being an artist searching for your arena and can't find it. And that constant battle you have of trying to find what it is you're put on earth to do. And you search in so many different areas, and you fight so many different things, because art is an emotional aspect, but art is also violence. And those combinations bringing into Bronson is just really an allegory or metaphor for somebody becoming an artist and finding a way to work within that. And then wanting to be famous because that's what you want to do as well. Being an artist also means there's a lot of fame that comes with that, and So there were different areas, and that's why I came up with the line in the movie, which basically starts the whole thing, that all his life, Charlie Bronson wanted to be famous.